Hi, welcome to the class. I'm Tom Fiet, and we're so glad that you're entering into this wonderful world of perspectives on social institutions. One of the very first assignments that we've given out to you for this course has to do with watching the film Martin Luther. The reason why we've chosen that film is that Martin Luther is a perfect example of what we're trying to get across in the film in general, and that is the important matters of our heart, the matters that haunt us deep into the night. These things stir in us, and after a time, if we're brave and courageous, we'll express these things of heart and mind to others. These things percolate, and eventually, given enough time and enough air, these things can become institutionalized. Martin Luther is a perfect example of that, in that so many of his personal struggles, whether they would be religious in nature or having to do with 16th century society, these were things that he noticed that bothered him terribly, haunted him deep into the night at times, and he began to write on these subjects. Fortunately for Martin Luther, or unfortunately, depending on the day, a person by the name of Gutenberg had also invented the printing press. So it was one of the very first times where someone was thinking something, writing something, and within a very short period of time, everyone else in the world around him was reading these thoughts. So it was a very exciting, very tumultuous time when Luther was doing his work. What I'd really like you to watch or pay attention to when you're watching the film really has to do with the exchange of Martin Luther's personal struggles and how they are transformed and translated into societal and especially institutional forms. So for instance, one of the big issues that Martin Luther struggled with has to do with the whole idea of holiness and enormity. Luther asked the question, can an ordinary person fully enter into mystery, into holiness, into enormity? Was it possible for the ordinary person to be engaged in these matters, or was this reserved simply for those of the clergy or of the nobility? His question really is a democratization of the whole idea of holiness. It was an interesting idea and very compelling for Luther, and that's why if you go to a Lutheran church on a Sunday morning, you'll see in front of you, in every pew, a Bible. The message, a distant message from Martin Luther saying, you can read this on your own, you can make sense of these holy things on your own, or maybe with the help of a community likewise engaged. It's a beautiful idea, and that's a perfect example really of what we're talking about in terms of an individual struggling with a certain issue, haunted by it, and then eventually it becomes a public issue, and then eventually, over time, an institutional birthing and sustaining of various institutions. You can see how Martin Luther is a perfect example this way, because so many of his thoughts about ordinary human beings flowered into things like churches, flowered into things like higher institutions of higher education. It was very important for him that people could read, and places like Marist College certainly would be an institution that would agree with Luther on this score, that ordinary people can become extraordinary if given the tools to do so. So when you're watching the film, hopefully with a friend or a family member, I would like you to ask these questions. What is Martin Luther going through personally? And then how are those personal issues translated into public discourse, and then eventually into public institutions? I hope you have a great time. Pay attention to these subtleties and maybe not so subtle movements. And then maybe you might want to ask yourself what's rumbling in you that might one day become institutionalized. Good luck.